What's going on, y'all? KMBest here. I went 17-5 in High Infinite with this Archangel deck, but I still don't think he's all that good. Archangel is an objective card whose trigger is destroying 4 of your own cards and whose result is reviving one of them with +4 power. Now, because of the nature of his objective, he doesn't fit very well in typical destroy style decks. These are decks that are mostly focused on things like Deadpool and Wolverine, which weirdly Archangel doesn't actually work with because they're not actually dead and able to be revived at the time his trigger is going off. They're on the board and in the hand, so you're not really getting much out of it. Now, that does mean that you can use those cards to control what you're going to get, but in practice, most of what this guy is useful doing is reviving something with an on reveal that you particularly enjoy, which puts him more in the Fire Hair Elixir camp of cards than anywhere else. But because of his fairly stringent requirements, Elixir ends up being the real comp for him. And Elixir is a little bit more useful in situations where you aren't destroying 4 things per game, and when you need to have things revived at specific points in time, which leaves this guy very few spots to actually make this work. So what did I do so well with? Well, I don't know if you're gonna like it. That's right, it's Mill. Or more accurately, just a deck with a lot of disruption and some reasonable tech cards backed up by a mid-range package that tops out with a fairly cheap death. It's probably less correct to refer to this as Mill than it is to just refer to it as relatively disruptive mid-range. Killmonger means you're pretty good against one-drop scalers like Batroc or things that are playing Kitty Pryde, Sholau, and Maverick. Shang-Chi means you're pretty good against various Fin Fang Foom and or Star-Lord duplication tactics as long as you can take priority, and that generally gives you just a decent enough matchup profile combined with the disruption you get off of things like Iceman and Cable to allow this deck to meaningfully function as a disruptive threat. Now, I don't know who made this specifically. It's a million different people have played variants of this deck, but I did see it on Untapped, which is where I got it, and I made exactly 0 changes to it. This is a list that is largely going to be in a lot of games, and you're going to need to adapt to the changing circumstances of what is my Cable pulling? How cheap can I get my death? Do I have the cards for this matchup at this time? Am I meant to do a big misery fire hair to like really mill them out? Or is that not actually going to benefit me? This is a pretty contextual deck that has a relatively low level of power that I personally feel like I went on a pretty good run with, rather than it being indicative of Archangel specifically. I do think it might be indicative of being able to play Shang-Chi and Killmonger still being a pretty big advantage in a metagame like this. It was, in my opinion, a pretty big part of why negative Star-Lord was actually good, was that it was a good Shang-Chi Killmonger deck, and there just aren't a lot of those. So one of my takeaways from this is I do think that there's probably a little bit of room for Shang-Chi Killmonger in the current metagame, especially in a world where people are just playing Star-Lords after playing a Psylocke on 3. That guy's going to have 10 power, and if you Shang-Chi it, they're going to die, and you're going to have priority because that's just how it works. Like, there's a lot of upside to being a Shang Killmonger deck against the big guys in the metagame right now, and there's a lot of upside to being like a functional mid-range deck against things like Super Giants. The one matchup that really felt like it gave me problems was Doom 2099. Didn't really feel like a very winnable matchup because they are just big brothering you with numbers and you don't have enough meaningful interaction for that matchup. But outside of that one specifically, this felt like a fairly reasonable deck. But the Archangel of it all is, I don't really think Archangel was a huge part of me doing what this deck wanted to do. Like, yeah, there were some cool things that he did, like reviving a demon or something, but those weren't necessarily guaranteed. I think Archangel could use some targeting or some additional power, whether that be reviving something with more power or reviving something that is the strongest thing that died in much the same way as Adamantium Infusion does. Right now, he's like a fine little piece, but hardly worth going out of your way to go acquire and build a deck around. That said, the deck did do notably better than I expected, so let's do a card-by-card breakdown and see if we can pinpoint why. Hood Misery has fallen out of fashion as of late in V-hand decks that have developed ways that specifically go notably taller. I still think it's a very reasonable card in a deck that is actually keying off of the destruction and not just off of Hood Misery itself. What makes Misery Hood in a deck like this so good is that it's also reducing the cost of your death and maybe repeating other on reveals thanks to cards like Firehair. You get to multiply it a lot more in a deck like this, where it's a much smaller part of the game plan in decks like V-hand and thus ends up a little bit more replaceable. In a deck like this, Hood Misery is kind of a big deal. It's a lot of where your power comes from, which is indicative more of the relatively low power level of this deck, but it is still notable. Iceman is actually quite an important card here because we've talked a decent amount about the relatively low power of a deck like this. Most of what this deck is going to do is fairly minimal in terms of its own output, which makes disruption extremely, extremely important. And this deck really overloads on various forms of disruption, right? Like, you have Iceman, you have Cable, who's not necessarily consistent disruption, but he is inconsistently going to be able to do things like win you the game. Even Gladiator, sometimes he'll lose you the game, sometimes he'll win you the game. You have a lot of these cards in the deck that just like have not necessarily always game winning upside, but the potential to high roll tremendously or low roll tremendously. Noted, right? But Iceman is the one of those that is the least going to lose you the game, right? Like, sometimes Cable will draw your opponent closer to the thing you don't want to see that game. That's bad. Sometimes Gladiator will pull something that you really don't want to see that game. That's bad. Iceman's basically always doing good stuff for you, and I really, really like him. I like him in a bunch of decks right now because the more people are focused on, I need to make play X, Y, and Z on like 3, 4, and 5, the better it is to turn that stuff off. Archangel himself here is a combination of stat output and just repeating on reveals a lot of the time. Like, most of what you're doing with him is just saying, I'm going to be a 2/7. I'm going to play this card and I'm going to be like a 2/7 with some additional power. Maybe I'll be a 2/9. And this deck, like we said, is a little bit hard up for power, so it actually kind of is just interested in a 2/9. And sometimes that 2/9 comes with like massive additional upside. Like, you'll do some stuff with Venom, who's really the card that allows you to actually play Archangel. Is like, you're not just doing like Killmonger and Gladiator, is that like you're going to actually spend some time in this deck on 5 a lot of the time, eating a lane full of big stuff that then allows Archangel to revive something meaningful, and you're sort of doubling up on the power that way. That's kind of the major role he's adding to this deck. Like, other than that, it's a fairly typical sort of mill, again, don't love that name, strategy here, but Archangel Venom allows you to just add like a pretty decent amount of power for a fairly low cost, while also adding another way to discount your death. That package does add power into this list, and it is noticeable. Firehair felt a little iffy here. Like, I wouldn't be particularly shocked if it was just flat out better to replace either Firehair or Archangel, to be honest with you, but I'd lean Firehair with Iron Patriot and just be like, I like more points, please. Please give me more points. I need numbers that I can actually count on here. I'm running a Gladiator. I have to be a, like, kind of an Iron Patriot deck. That seems like something that would make sense to me. Firehair was pretty rarely actively adding more. Like, I would say between the two drops, I know this is going to sound a little bit crazy because I've spent a decent amount of video saying that Archangel's not that good. Between the 2 drops, I think Archangel was better than Firehair here. So there is something to be said for that. Your best 2-drop by a lot, 2/4 with upside, great ability to randomly win games. A deck like this with such a low level of consistent output needs as many Hail Marys as it can get. A Hail Mary with good stats. Cable is phenomenal. Killmonger does a couple things here. Like, if I had to pinpoint what specifically makes this deck feel reasonable in the current metagame and what sort of defines what its matchups are, it's Killmonger and it's Shang-Chi, right? If you have Killmonger, you have outs into a decent amount of Sholau draws, because a decent amount of Sholau draws involve a 1-drop getting a Maverick buff. So if you can play for that, throw priority, you're going to be in a pretty good spot a lot of the time. They play a lot of 1s. The other thing that you want to cover with Killmonger is your own desire for blowing up some of your stuff, right? Like, in as much as Firehair is good, it's often in the context of being backup misery. So I blow up my hood with a Killmonger and get another demon. That kind of thing is actually a fairly legitimate use of the card when it's ever going to be useful, is because of stuff like that. It also helps you get to the amount of requisite destroys needed for Archangel. Definitely a card that helps you and allows your death to be cheaper while also providing meaningful matchup coverage. It's not a 100% win against Sholau, but if you don't run Killmonger in a deck like this, you're like kind of 0% to win against Sholau. I talked a little bit about Venom already. Mostly he is adding consistency to your death and to your Archangel, and that's a pretty useful thing to do. This wouldn't be something that you'd be interested in doing a few months ago, because largely whether you're interested in doing this depends a lot on whether or not other people are playing Shang-Chi and whether or not other people are playing Shadow King. And right now, not a lot of people are doing those things, which is why you can get away with something like consolidating all of your power into a lane, into one big guy who is vulnerable to those kind of things. Since not a lot of people are doing those things, you are able to get away with it. That's not necessarily a justification of it's going to be like that forever, or this is a permanent state of affairs, but it is the state of affairs right now, and it does add something to this deck to be able to look at the metagame and say, no one's really going to punish me for this, so I'm going to free roll my Archangel Revive off of Venom, and that actually will be a free roll rather than opening me up to getting obliterated by the cards that are everywhere, which they were 6 months ago, but not so much now. Zemo is a fine card, but I caution you against actually investing in the mill part of this deck. Like, I almost wonder if putting him in this deck is a trap, because it teaches people that, like, when they look at this deck list, that this is a mill deck, and then they just play it wrong. He's fine. He's mostly just 3 fairly big. You play him when you've already taken some stuff out of the deck, so he's going to be like a 3 even bigger. Sometimes it can be useful to mill people, but like overwhelmingly, taking the cards that cost the least, especially by turn 3, typically that's going to help your opponent because they don't necessarily want to draw those cards. There are going to be some games where he goes absolutely crazy and the stats end up being worth it, and it's just amazing. All love to Baron Zemo. But this is definitely a card that I think if you see Cable in this deck and you see Baron Zemo in this deck, you're like, all right, I know what it is here. We're milling them. And I think if you play the deck like that, you're probably going to end up losing more than you win. Gladiator is extremely hit or miss. Extremely hit or miss. I've had him win games by pulling a Sholau out of the deck on 3. Win that game. Love it. Great. I've had him lose games by pulling a Fin Fang Foom out of the deck on 3. Lose that game. Hate it. Great. And like, yes, you have Shang-Chi to clean up whatever he pulls that is like awkward and bad, but since we're not a Fenris Wolf deck, we don't get nearly as much upside from that as if we were. Speaking of which, bring back Fenris at 2-3, you cowards. I think Gladiator is, again, one of the cards in this deck that might trick you into playing it wrong. Like, you're like, I've got Gladiator, I've got Cable, I got Baron Zemo, I'm a mill deck. No, he's just here because most of the time he's a 3/8 that discounts death. That's really what you're looking for out of this card, is 3/8 that discounts death a lot of the time. Enough of the time, he is going to be that. And when he is not that, you are super dead. Shang feels like a pretty good card right now, to be honest with you. There are a bunch of people doing various Fin Fang Foom things, various Star-Lord things, and a lot of those things are at some point in their execution pretty vulnerable to instantly losing to a Shang-Chi, depending on what their setups are. Now, a lot of those decks, if you let them get their setup fully, will be doing things like Juggernaut to Elias, and then your Shang-Chi kind of sucks. It's definitely kind of an answer you're doing in the intermediate, like the turn they play Star-Lord and it goes to 10 power. That's probably when you're Shanging it, right? And that's probably the turn you're going to actually have priority to do it before they can start doubling it, right? You got to stop these guys before they do the thing they're trying to do. It's also just naturally a very good card against ramp. Any deck playing big cards is going to be particularly vulnerable to El Shanger Banger, but notably, the matchup that I think he's really bringing you closer in is the Star-Lord stuff, because he's just so good against their plan A. Misery is definitely she's wearing a lot of hats here, where what she's doing is providing like extra procs on your on reveals, also providing reduction in cost to your death. And that creates a lot of awkwardness. It is very clear that the best thing to do with Misery in this deck is play her with the hood. There is no real question about that. That is the highest upside thing you can possibly do. Probably the lowest upside thing you can do is play her on a lane with Gladiator in it. But that makes sort of managing your early game a little bit awkward, right? If you play the hood on one lane and then you play a cable on that lane, you're like, I'm setting this up to be the Misery lane. That's not necessarily all that great. Your opponent might be able to Cosmo that lane. It's also costing you the 4 points of power on cable, which is like, okay, is that actually worth drawing the extra card? This card wears a lot of hats, but you have to figure out what she's doing. Is her job to be a card that is going to double a couple of on reveals and then discount my death a little bit? Is she a hood bot? Is she going for a full lane of on reveal doubling and you're just accepting that if you get Cosmoed, it's super awkward? There are things that you have to consider game to game with this card, and overwhelmingly, I don't think you'll be doing yourself a disservice if you look at Misery and what you actually see is play this card on the hood and only the hood. You can do it with other stuff, but a lot of the time, that's what you're doing. And the other stuff is like, I need some more kills for my death, you know? That's a lot of what she is here. In as much as this is an archetype, I think the correct way to phrase what this archetype is as Death Midrange. Like, mill, not really what it is. Death Midrange is what it is. This is a deck that is built around using Death to supplement a mid-range game plan that has a splashable amount of destroy. So this allows you to have a very cheap beat stick, some demons, some interaction on the final turn, and that is just going to have to be enough. It is a very much a disruptive mid-range death deck, way more than it is a mill deck in any meaningful sense of the word. Your milling is not a win con. Cable just randomly wins you the game sometimes. Your milling is not a win con. Gladiator just randomly wins or loses you the game sometimes. It's just that's what those cards do. And sometimes you'll get a contribution to death off of Misery. You'll get a contribution to death off of Gladiator. You get a contribution to death off of Shang-Chi. You get a contribution to death off of Killmonger. This deck really scales with how many one-drops your opponents plays. So, because that is the best way to get death cheap is kill their stuff. So it's definitely notable. But more than anything else, the cards that define this deck are Death, Misery, and the Hood, followed by Shang-Chi and Killmonger. That's the core here. So, Archangel, I think he's actually bad, if I had to guess. Like, I know it's hard to look at me doing so well with a deck and be like, well, the deck's probably got room to be optimized. Maybe these are the cards that are being optimized out. But I think it's fairly likely that, like, you could be just as successful replacing this card and Firehair with like Iron Patriot and Sam Wilson. Just like kind of anything that does stats well or is a good card at the 2 slot, I think you could very easily do. I don't think Archangel is filling a necessary role for this deck. I think this deck is filling a necessary role for Archangel, which is trying to find somewhere where he actually makes sense. Largely, I would describe this card as a card without a home. Even though I think this deck is probably good, I strongly suspect that it might be better if you took Archangel out and replaced him with another card. And I really think that says it all. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal. Please remember to stick around for some gameplay. I hope you enjoy that. You can see the games I was winning with this list and judge for yourself how important Archangel was. As always, I really appreciate you. In case you can't tell, fell a little bit under the weather here. A little bit of cough drop action going on. But we push through. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Different sentence. Noted. What we doing here? Oh, shit. I don't even know if I'm allowed to snap that. That's how, like, it's really good, but, Still might just lose. Yep. I mean, I got a Shang-Chi in here. Who can say? Surely I just draw the Shang.
Rest in peace.
Hail Hydra!
Impressive. Rest in peace.
I don't know what happens here. Where does their power come from? Is this the play? Works. Works. Yeah! Let's go.
Victory.
Go over for me. Oh. All right, we got a curve. We got it's curved stone. No, I think it's got to be this. Fuck.
I want the throne.
Clear for takeoff.
I think if I order it like this, I mean, I'm still gonna die, but it's like slightly cheaper death. Yeah.
peace.
What have I killed? A bunch of shit. How concerned with Sholau am I? Extremely. It'd be +6, right? No, +9. They all go right. Shit. I tried. Revive the demon. Oh! We did it! Thanos gamer. Trying to draw that Thanos, eh? Sure. Trying to draw that Thanos, eh? Dazzler ain't a bad rip. I'll get to Killmonger eventually. At least a little fascinating. Problem is, I don't have anywhere Killmonger can go other than this turn, you know? So if I don't draw Killmonger immediately, we're in trouble. Now it sort of raises the question, am I even meant to do it? Because if I just go the other way and try to fill the lanes up, Thanos is 10 power, right? Oh, fuck, he's 12. Shit! I lose now.
I want the throne.
I mean, maybe I do, maybe I don't. I suppose that's kind of the... operative question. What do they have to follow this up is kind of the thing, right? Can I just make a read that they never go right because of the threat of the Ant-Man? They just play their biggest thing left? Yeah!
Victory.
Somehow Mill return? I don't think that's true, dog. I'll be fully honest with you. I don't. Huh. Yes! We're getting rips, baby.
Impressive.
I think I just have to snap it, right?
Snap.
Spider still a win con? Not with my fucking Shang-Chi, it's not.
I want the throne.
I'm gonna have priority because of the Mojo World, yeah? So, the game just ends. We're done here. Galactus. Yeah, that would do it. Should I play around Galactus? Feeling it, chat? Galactus play around? Top 5 cards when it comes to doing nothing. Feel. Bang! Another Doom 2099 gamer. Kind of an unwinnable. Kind of a super unwinnable matchup. Kind of a incredibly unwinnable. Okay, well, they haven't played anything for this entire game, and I still think I'm gonna fucking lose. So, really bad sign there. Really bad sign there.
I want the throne.
Rest in peace.
Wait, it eats the fire hair first, so it won't. I think this works. If I'm wrong, I'm an idiot. But, Yo! Beast mode. Holy shit. Demo Venom right doesn't get the death as cheap, unfortunately. Okay, so 2 Doom bots and a big Doom is basically my guess here.
Impressive.
Doom rules all.
That's bad. Okay, so just anywhere but there. We're good. Oh, I guess even there would have won. We finally figured out how to beat Doom 2099. It was... They don't... Is Zemo a created card? When I pull a Zemo, is that a created card? Anybody? No? Okay. All right, I mean, if we can do something here, we can get these deaths working, we got a plan. Okay! Oh! Fuck is this game, bro?
Rest in peace.
Rods. Okay, I've got a plan. They're gonna go for the Nimrod thing here, and I am going to Luna Snow here and turn it off. Ready? We still might die, is the problem. No, they're gonna merge with a Luna Snow. I don't know if this is good enough to snap on, but it's really funny. Nice merge, dude. I heard you like ice cubes. If I go Venom, then I get a Fire Hair Shuri on whatever I play left. Yeah? I do Misery a Gladiator. It doesn't do anything. But it does destroy the Gladiator.
Impressive.
Cut off one head, two more shall take its place.
Seems good. I don't know, just this? What's in my destroy pile that could kill me here? Just misery, really, right? Which surely wouldn't happen.
Rest in peace.
You are mine.
$14? Oh, nice try, dude. Holy shit. Nice fucking try with the Galactus revival. Anyway, yeah, we successfully put our bullshit together. Am I stupid? Why does this say created by Chronosphere Sphinx? Like, what? Oh! Oh, they just had a second Galactus the entire game. Oh my god! They got the second copy of Galactus. I get it. I get it. I get it. Okay.